Hello, my name is Nathaniel Smart, and we're going to talk about a topic today that should span across the board, ethical leadership. And not only in leadership, but everyone should uphold ethics. Ethical leadership in terms as it relates to cannabis distribution. Normally, I would come to you and talk about minorities and what minorities would face. No matter what your demographics are, you should be an ethical person. And we're going to talk about this from the standpoint of cannabis distribution, meaning that are we allowed to allow marijuana to be distributed in certain parts of the world, assuming that that state legalizes it. Overview. Before this presentation is over, you should expect to have an understanding of the ethical dilemma, talking about the cannabis distributor. We will talk about that next slide. Ethical business conduct, ethical leadership, the need for ethical leadership in organizations, attributes and behaviors of ethical leaders, the importance of a reflective mindset in managers, approaching and handling ethical issues in the organization. First of all, let's get started with ethical dilemma. Here's the dilemma. The decision makers are interested in a cannabis distributor in the southern region of Texas. And cannabis meaning marijuana, assuming that the state has legalized it. We know that cannabis is not legal in every state. However, once it's legal in the state of Texas, decision makers are interested in allowing distribution in the southern region. Why southern region? Because in the south, there's a lot of health issues and decision makers felt like that would curtail or remedy some of the health issues because it is a substance that has healing, I guess, healing agents, if you will. Want to do it for recreational purposes. We understand that from a medicine standpoint, you can get it in every state as long as a doctor prescribe it, but for recreational purposes, all states have not legalized it yet. These are some of the things that decision makers consider in trying to decide, and we're going to take it further by looking at other concepts and theories used in the organization in hopes to try to make a better informed decision regarding the dilemma. Just as a preliminary, we looked at some of the research and we noticed that it reduced health issues, as I stated earlier. Not only that, but it contributes to the Texas economy. We understand the few states that have legalized it, it has made a financial impact. So can you imagine if more states or if all states have legalized it, how much it would stimulate the economy? But we can't base it on money because your I believe your personal value should take precedence over money. But these are some of the competing factors. Personal values, as I just stated, your beliefs, your values, your convictions, uh, they come into play when making these types of decisions. We're facing the religious community. Texas is a Bible belt, so you may get some pushback from the people of the religious community. And there are some risk factors, governmental regulations we have to consider. And those risk factors, just like alcohol, you do occasionally have where a person will get in the car under the influence and drive and harm others. That is so unfortunate. And I'm sure that if Texas were to legalize this here, we would have those incidents because we just can't monitor everything. We trust that everybody would take responsibility and use cannabis responsibly, but we know that's not always the case. We're going to look at the whole picture before a decision is made. Ethical business conduct. That's just a matter of how you carry yourself, the way you talk, the way you act, your conduct with honesty, integrity. Do you comply with the rules, the laws, not only the policy within your organization, but hopefully those policies are congruent with the governmental laws, like the anti-corruption law. I know once a year we take a couple courses within our organization to make sure that we're abreast of those laws. Exemplify ethical behavior. That's especially important for leaders, but not only for leaders, but also for the subordinates. I think everybody has a responsibility to conduct himself or herself ethically, especially for the newer people who are coming into the organization. They need to see an example. The code of ethics policy as a guide when we're making sure that we want to practice best practices, if you will. There's the code of conduct as a guide you can refer to in helping you with your actions and your conduct, and as well as making decisions. Reporting incidents. When we see something, we say something. Especially if you're a manager, that's an opportunity for coaching and development. These are all behaviors of ethical conduct. Reflective decision making. Before you think before you act, making sure that you consider your personal beliefs, making sure that you follow the policy within your organization and the government policies. All those things come into play when you make decisions. Ethical leadership, what is that? It's a moral person, a moral manager. And what that essentially is, a moral person is someone who has values, someone who considers their beliefs when making a decision. I guess kind of like a from a deontological standpoint, which we will go into detail later, it's a person who makes decision based on what they were taught, regardless of what the outcome or what the benefits may be. If they were taught it was wrong, then it was wrong. They will deter from that decision. So going back to the cannabis distributor, if you're from the religious community, you're like, oh no, smoking weed or marijuana is ungodly, no matter how much it contributes to the economy, no matter how much it reduces health issues, it is morally wrong. And then you won't make that decision based on your conviction. That's what a moral person is. And a moral manager is someone who promotes ethics, calling it out, coaching and development, their subordinates, working with HR, making sure they're in compliance, and different things like that, promoting a culture of ethics. Exhibit ethical traits, behaviors, role modeling. That's what ethical leadership is. We need somebody who can exhibit that behavior. There have been some issues in the past where leaders were trusted to do their job, but found out later on they were embezzling money and just involved in all types of unethical behavior. A few years ago, you remember the situation with Enron and WorldCom, where those managers were stealing money from the company, and in a couple of instances, those companies went belly up as a result. So shareholders, business owners, investors, they need somebody in management role that they can trust to do the right thing. Promote best practices, I stated earlier, making sure that we have an ethical culture, holding others accountable. And then I put transformation and spiritual leadership in there because I feel like those leadership approaches fall under the umbrella of ethical leadership, because transformational and spiritual leadership are focused on the subordinates. They focus on inspiring and motivating and influencing the follower. They are interested in the well-being of the employer. Why do organizations need ethical leadership? Well, so that we can have effective teamwork. Many organizations now work in teams. Your team members, your subordinates, they need an example, going back to the role model. They need to see a leader or their leader interact with other people and how they just, go about doing business ethically so that they can treat each other with respect and carry out ethical behavior. It positively impacts the workforce. We need trustworthy leaders. I mentioned that on the last slide. Leaders who we can trust and not worry about leaders embezzling money or putting their interests before the interest of the organization, and fostering an ethical culture. These are some of the reasons why organizations need ethical leadership. Role model for aspiring leaders. We have people that we're training to be leaders. They need to see good examples. They need to see leaders who are practicing good behavior so that they can be influenced. Attributes and behaviors of ethical leaders. Now, there are many competencies and traits of an ethical leader, but I just listed a couple here. Lead by example, transparency, consistency, being fair across the board. That's very important. Coaching and feedback. Whenever you see something, someone's out of line, you correct that. That's an opportunity for the leader to coach and develop. Organizational needs as a priority, making sure that the organizational needs are above yours, not going into a role with your agenda. And then, of course, on the right side, you see a couple more: trustworthiness, respect, responsibility, and the list goes on. Those things or those traits a leader needs to demonstrate in order to exemplify ethical attributes and behavior. The importance of a reflective mindset in managers. Reflexivity is crucial for moral judgment. It goes back to what I mentioned earlier. You reflect on your morals and your values, and it influences and it impacts your judgment. It helps you make a decision. Accountable for self and actions. We just basically take a look at ourselves and we reflect. That's what reflective mindset in managers is. Action of being mindful. In fact, think before you act, before you do something, before you make a decision. Reflect on those things. Make an informed decision. In other words, be led by your moral compass. Approaching and handling ethical issues in the organization. When you're faced with ethical dilemmas, when you're faced with an ethical issue, how do I get through that? How do I get through that successfully? How do I make the right decision? Well, everything is not black and white. There are some ambiguity. There are some gray areas. And I'm just going to go over a couple concepts of what people use to get through ethical situations. First of all, we have the concept or the theory of utilitarianism and consequentialism. And they essentially mean the same, right? I'm just going to paraphrase it. It's just like looking at a whole situation, not just being one sided, looking at the total picture. And before making that decision, they make sure that the benefits or the outcome are more beneficial than the risk. Going back to the cannabis situation, there are some risk involved. Someone will get in the car and they will drive under the influence. Hopefully, they don't hurt anyone. Things like that happen when you act irresponsibly. But if you look at the whole picture, if you look at the contribution, if you look at reducing the health issues, do those benefits outweigh that one risk? Are there more benefits than they are risk? And that's what it means to make a decision from the standpoint of utilitarianism and consequentialism. On the other hand, we have deontology that I mentioned earlier. Actions are strictly guided by morals and values. So no matter what the outcome is, this person says, hey, I was raised in the church. My preacher, my parents taught me that smoking marijuana is wrong. So no, I'm not for it. I'm against it. These people are not open minded to anything. Their values dictate them. Now, again, that's good in the sense because I believe that you should stand for something, but a lot of times in organizations, what you believe will sometimes, or what you don't believe, will sometimes contradict the policy of the organization. You might be required to do something, or you might be required not to do something that conflict with your values. And you have to think about that. How would you handle that? And then, of course, if you're in a situation as when faced with ambiguity, you're going to face some areas where you're uncertain. Rather than making a decision and guessing it, ask someone, preferably someone in HR. Reach out to the compliance department if you have one, or ask other leaders in the organization. You definitely want to consult because the objective here is to conduct yourself ethically, report unethical practices, reference the code of ethics policy. that guide is there. And if you don't have one, your HR department or your manager should be able to provide you with one, or they should show you where to go and look for it. Thank you for your time and your attention. Do we have any questions or comments? If you think of any questions or comments later, go ahead and reach out to me. I will provide each of you my card with my contact information. So if you think of anything, just shoot me an email or you can call my office phone. If I'm not available, leave a message. I will get back with you within 24 hours.